Jancy McPhee will be talking about science and art and telling you about some of the amazing things she's doing with her organization.
Thank you very much. Hey there, Comic Palooza. How are you doing? You having a good time? I know it's totally overwhelming. There's a lot of things going on. There's blinking lights, there's sound and everything. So I just want to thank you for taking a little pause to come say hi to me and also listen to a couple of things that I want to talk to you about. So first of all, as David said, I am Dr. Jancy McPhee, and I want to talk about some of the same things that our former speaker talked about, which is that you need to get your skills, but you also need to follow your heart. And the interesting thing about that is that you should always have a path, but you don't always know where that path is taking you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story as an example and some things that you can be working on now and how we can all work together to change the world. So next slide. So thank you, David. So this represents me, my first year in college. So I had studied lots of science as a kid. I loved it. I went to public school. I had great science teachers. It was a lot of fun. But I also, all my hobbies were music and theater. And my mom was really into art and literature. So when I got to college, I had one of those, what do I want to be when I grow up? If I go in one direction, I shut the doors in the other direction. And that was not really a good option for me. So I tried to find something that combined everything I had, my experience and my interests. So I decided to become a cellular and molecular neuroscientist. So what does that mean? That means that I study the molecules that make your brain work and allow you to move and have feelings and think creative thoughts. So I did that for almost 2 decades, and then I went to work for NASA. And my job at NASA was to come up with these big science strategies that brought all kinds of different people together from different countries to help them work together to solve the challenges to the human on future space exploration missions. So if you think about it, next slide please, space wants to kill you. But our job is to make sure that doesn't happen. So we've got space vehicles, we've got space suits, but we're also thinking a lot about how do we make sure that space radiation isn't a problem? What do we do when we live and work in a place that doesn't have the gravity that we have, right? So I'm standing here and my feet are on the ground because Earth has gravity. But when we're orbiting the Earth in space, we're effectively falling constantly and we're floating. So that actually changes what happens to our muscles and our bones over time. And we're talking about sending people back to the moon and onward to Mars. And those trips to Mars are going to take 2 or 3 years. So it is the job of the Human Research Program to figure out how to keep those astronauts healthy physically, but also mentally. How would you like to be in a tiny space with the same 4 people for 3 years? I think we'll all have to be trained a lot of skills in how to not want to scream after that. So it's both the mind and the body. So that's my science job at NASA. I'm the Associate Chief Scientist of the Human Research Program. Next slide, please, David. So one of the things I want to let you know is we're at a really cool time in space exploration. We've got NASA. I'm sure all of you have heard of NASA. We've got NASA, the space agency, and there are space agencies all over the world, and there are more space agencies than there were 10 years ago. But there's also a whole bunch of commercial companies that are working to take more and different kinds of people up. So space is really opening for everyone. So why is that important to what I want to talk about? One of my jobs is to make sure that everybody knows that amazing things are happening in space, and I want to invite everybody to get involved and interested in it. So next slide, please. And go ahead and hit the next click. So one of the challenges about space exploration is not just science and technology, but all the other challenges, the politics, the learning how to work together with people from different countries and different backgrounds, the strategy, how are we going to actually go to Mars? How are we going to stay safe? How are we going to visit the surface of Mars? So there's lots and lots of things that have to be fixed. We have lots of challenges. In order to answer those challenges, there are three things, and these are not the only three, but three things that are super important. One is to be able to talk about space and get everybody excited about it and interested. And two is also to figure out how to work together, because it's going to take a lot of different people working together to solve those challenges I just mentioned. And three is we need creative solutions. So we need to think innovatively. So the importance of communication is that you not just say, hey, I built this rover. You need to say, why is that rover interesting? Next slide, please. And communications is very much at the basis of working on big, diverse teams to solve challenges. Next question, next slide. And this is my favorite. What does it take to be creative? So a lot of people I meet tell me that they think that you're either born creative or you're not. Well, that's ridiculous. I don't think anybody in this entire George R. Brown Convention Center is working at their ultimate level of creativity. And every person is creative. But you can make yourself more creative if you do three things. One is you learn a lot, and you learn a lot about a lot of things. So you think about what interests you. If you like science and you like theater, you should do them both. Be broad in what you learn about and the experiences you have. No experience is irrelevant, and you'll see why in a minute for me. The second thing is, think about if you always do the same thing to solve a problem. Be aware of other ways of looking at problems and how to fix them. The third thing is, you need to really care about being creative about something, or it's not going to happen, because trust me, being creative is hard. So you need to be motivated. Next slide, please. So obviously David already told you that besides being a scientist, I also have this nonprofit called SciArt Exchange, as in science art. And one of the interesting things is that art can actually really support getting people excited about the future of space and all the science and technology that has to evolve to support it. And we know this from the professional arts community. We've heard the great speeches about the first person to put their foot on the moon. We've watched movies about Martians, and 2001: A Space Odyssey is the second image that maybe most of you are too young to know about, but I know about that one. And interesting about that image is all those science meetings I go to about artificial gravity, there has never been a vehicle like that, so they use clips from the movie to illustrate the concept. And that's an important point, because art can help you to visualize something that doesn't exist. And then the scientists and the engineers can come in and see if they can actually create it. So there's this interesting back and forth and exchange between science and engineering and the arts, and it's important to realize and not undervalue that. But mostly what's being represented here is communicating about space. Next slide, please. Space is also very inspiring. It can give us role models, superheroes. This is Luna Girl. And there I am in my very old Star Trek uniform. And I was inspired by space at a very young age. Next slide, please. But the interesting thing about space is whether it's a piece of music, a quote of visual art, a quote of literary art, or an image, it can tell you a story in just a few symbols. So here we are. This is that photo, we've all seen it, of a man putting his foot on the moon. That actually happened. That's a photo. But in the second panel is a clip from a video from an artist who worked with us to inspire us to think about whose blueprint will next go on the moon. And it will be a woman, and NASA has that in their plans. And then the third is thinking even further into the future. When we're not just setting foot on the moon, but now we're setting our foot on the surface of Mars, people in person. So just these 3 images have told you an amazing story. Next slide, please. And I bet you don't realize that the very cell phone that you're playing with while I'm talking is actually the product of a lot of collaborations between artists and scientists and borrowing from arts and science. And another point is that some of our most talented scientists and engineers are Nobel laureates. About 95% of them are still active in the arts of some sort. So all of you people who think that the only way we're going to get really good at science and engineering is to just focus on science and engineering, well, that's not true. You need to have broad experience. It's going to teach you some other skills in addition that will make you a better scientist, engineer, or robotics person. Next slide, please. And if you think in real life that we do not use the arts with our space exploration, you're not right. So in the spirit of robotics, I included the Mars 2020 rover. And did they call it the Mars 2020 rover? No. They called it Perseverance, to be inspiring about the future and what this rover could do. And its sidekick, the little helicopter, is called Ingenuity. So we are using the arts and creative communication for real life in our science and engineering with space. Next slide, please. So just to tell you a little bit about our nonprofit, and our booth is that way, if you want. And we have a couple of activities for young people and adults as well, if you're interested. We'll get to that in a minute. It's called SciArt Exchange, and it focuses on the 3 things I mentioned. I want to engage everybody in space and science and technology. And working with our colleagues, we are trying to enhance everyone's creative potential so that eventually we are going to come together and we are going to solve the challenges ahead. And space is one target, but you all know we've got a lot of challenges. And thanks to the previous speaker, we know that some of them are related to some of the topics she was talking about environmentally. Next slide, please. And so we're built on something initially, which is that we hold international online contests for people of different age groups to create multimedia artwork, visual art, literary, music, film, about the future of space exploration. And then next slide. We weave all of the best artwork into live performances and displays around the world. So we encourage the participants to learn about space and think creatively and train their own skills. And then we use their artwork to start a global dialogue and get everybody psyched about space and the fact that it is open to all of us. We can all contribute. Next slide, please. So as an example, here's a little bit of some of our children's artwork. We have many countries from around the world participating. I think we're over 60 countries now. Next slide. Here's a couple of examples of visual art from some of our adult contests. What you can't see in this slideshow is the multimedia, the music, the film, and the literature, but these are just some quick examples. Next slide. And so far, we have had 12,000 people participate in our activities, and over 3 million people have seen the artwork and been impacted by that artwork. So we're really trying, again, like our previous speaker, to inspire a movement that is worldwide and get everybody excited and feeling welcome and doing what they need to do to be the most creative people that they can, following their passions. Next slide, please. And if you're interested in some of the things we're doing, this is something that is always open. We have a couple of online activities that are super fun in the summer, and we encourage everyone to create artwork about their habitat, whether it's on the Earth or it's something imagined in space. And this was actually started during the pandemic so that people would share designs of their habitat and we would connect each other worldwide. And it was all connected to materials that we had that from famous astronauts and space architects, all talking about what we know about living in the isolated and confined environment of space and how that can help all of us here on Earth to thrive. Next slide, please. And this is open right now for high school students and adults. We are working with NASA Earth to create comic strips about how NASA's observational data of the Earth can help local communities worldwide solve their environmental challenges. And if you want to know more about that, you can just go to the website or you can come visit us at the booth. Next slide. So here's my final point. If we all do our best to learn as much as we can and foster many different kinds of skills and work hard to be creative and work well together, we can solve the grand challenges ahead. So that's the note I'd love to leave you all on. And if you want to talk at all about careers, I work with lots of interns. One of them's right there. And also I do some student mentoring, so I am comfortable and happy to talk about personal career journeys and what your passion is and how you think that might start you on your career journey. Thank you.